Good morning. As we wait for people to connect, I want to thank you for joining us. I'm Brian Abrahams, Vice President at Democratic Majority for Israel. On behalf of our President, Mark Melman, our board, our staff, and board chairs, Ann Lewis and Todd Richmond, welcome. DMFI is the only organization working from inside the Democratic Party to strengthen Democratic support for Israel. DMFI PAC, our separate sister organization's efforts, were critical in defeating anti-Israel squad members and candidates who were eager to join the squad last year. DMFI PAC also played key roles in flipping some House seats from red to blue. There's lots more to talk about, but we have two amazing speakers standing by, so I want to get to them. Events are moving quickly in Israel, and obviously today's discussion is very timely. If you have a question, you can submit it through the Q&A feature on the Zoom interface. If you're watching on Facebook, you can enter it in the comments section. Now, I'm very pleased to turn this over to the Pride of Atlanta, DMFI board member, Michael Rosenzweig.
Thanks so much, Brian. I appreciate that. As Brian said, we have two terrific speakers today. We're really looking forward to this. Our first speaker is Tal Schneider. Tal is political and diplomatic correspondent for the Times of Israel. She covers Israeli politics and diplomacy and previously served as the Washington, D.C. correspondent for Ma'ariv Daily. She's also got a history as a business and political consultant for Globes, where she also ran her own political blog. Tal is a frequent commentator on Israeli radio and Israeli TV. She's received several accolades, including, among many, the 2015 Ometz Award and the 2012 Google Digital Excellence in Journalism Award. Tal's work has been featured in many publications, including Globes, Haaretz, The Marker, Ma'ariv, and others. She's also a founding member of Israel's Journalism Association and the Israel Women's Reporters Society. We're delighted to welcome Tal to us today as she offers her perspective on President Trump's plan for Gaza, but also the latest with the ceasefire and hostage negotiations and how that has been received by key stakeholders. So Tal, thank you for joining us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, good morning to you. Good afternoon here in Israel. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with this group. I'm pretty sure that you're all following the news closely. The ceasefire is still in place, and tomorrow we have an hostages release on Shabbat on Saturday morning. We are looking forward. This country is in a total excitement, I suppose, about the hostages release every Saturday in the last couple of weeks. I can't even begin to describe to you how this country is shutting down in order to watch and feel the hostages coming home. It means people actually do not get out of the houses and they sit in front of their TV sets. And when the first hostages release took place, I think 6 weeks ago, you actually could hear screaming coming from houses on the block. People are just like cheering and crying, and they follow every bit of little detail. And I think it will, it doesn't wear out. Even tomorrow, I suppose, every bit of information about the hostage, about his wife, his family, and it's the entire country is so occupied with that. We have every Saturday, we have this special coverage. And I think from Friday morning, almost there's nothing else to talk about other than that. So the first phase of the hostages release is almost will end soon. Tomorrow, we'll see 3 hostages. One is Sagi Dekel Khan, is actually an American citizen. His wife and daughters, they were living in a kibbutz, and the wife was 9 months pregnant, Avital Dekel Khan. She was 9 months pregnant at the time of the massacre, and she had a young baby around 3 weeks to a month after the massacre. So the baby is now 1 year and 3 months, and Sagi never met her, and he will meet her tomorrow, and his 2 other daughters. So that's one story. The other one is of the Horn brothers. So just one of them is getting out tomorrow, the 2 brothers who were kidnapped, and only one of them is getting out. And the third hostage is actually a dual citizen for Russia and Israel. His name is Sasha Trapanov. He was kidnapped with his grandmother, mother, and girlfriend. The mother the grandmother, mother, and the girlfriend were released last year in the hostages release that took place at the end of November 23, and he remained in captivity since then. We had several videos of him during the period. Sasha Alex is also an engineer in Amazon. So he works with an American company, but for the Israeli chapter. The Israeli chapter was very, very helpful to the family, but Amazon as a whole, as the company, the American company, was not really forthcoming for his family and for him. Even there were a lot of news items about how some of the workers and maybe top people are calling to boycott Israel and so on during that period. But he will be out tomorrow. If you watched last Saturday, the three hostages that came out, the three men that came out a week ago were very, very thin and almost did not walk on their feet. They looked horrific. One of them, Oad Ben Ami, lost like 35 kilos. It's about, I suppose, kind of 75 pounds. I'm not pretty sure. Yeah, is it 75 pounds? He lost a lot of weight. And Eli Sharabi also, the three of them, they looked like, no one could really avoid saying that they looked like Holocaust survivor. It was really horrific to watch them. And Kit Siegel, who came out a week before them, now it's been 2 weeks since he's out, is also an American citizen. He recorded a video today for President Trump telling him about the ordeals. And in this video, he actually looks a lot better than he looked 2 weeks ago. Also very, very slim, a 65-year-old, an American citizen that is living in Israel. So we're looking forward for tomorrow. After that, there are still remaining 6 hostages alive and 8 bodies. All has to be out before March 6, I think. And then Israel will be left with 22 more hostages alive. I think the number is between 22 to 24. We are not completely sure. There's several Thai citizens. We are not sure they are alive. So I'm saying 22 with a cautious note. I'm not pretty sure if it's 22, 24, maybe 25, but this is the number of people who are still alive, among them soldiers of IDF who were kidnapped and civilians who were kidnapped. And the negotiation to have this phase, going along did not start yet. And that's, a huge problem. Israel's government was supposed to start negotiation on that phase, the following phase in which we get out the 22 more people. But Israel did not send an official group to negotiate. I think to the disappointment of many here. You have to understand this government is not completely on board with this mission. We keep hearing, they keep saying they are, but they're not acting upon it. So when they keep say that they want all of the hostages out, but then on background briefing, they say they want to resume the war, or all these kind of statements, which is very hard to understand what is the goal for them. So there is a huge gap in Israel between the government and the people at the moment. All public polling consistently for more than a year now suggests between 70 to 80% support for the hostage deal, including a complete end to the war. A complete end to the war, meaning not just the pullout, but also an announcement the war is over in order to get the people out. The government is not on that, doesn't think the same way as the people. They have a group of people who support them, of course, and think the war should resume. And this is the big, I suppose this is the big issue here at the moment, because if you don't go to a negotiation for the next chapter, and then you plan on resuming the war, then this is basically like declaring we are killing the hostages. This is 22 people. As I said, I think 4 of them are soldiers. One of the soldiers is an American citizen, Idan Alexander. The other soldier is also an American citizen. Omer Natura is actually announced dead by now. He was killed on October 7th. So the remaining group of the soldiers is about 4 or 5 of them. And then civilians, people who were abducted from their homes, all men, Some of them are young, as 24, 26, and so on. And it's a really horrific situation. The fact that people here think that, or government think that you can wait for Trump's plan to kick in. Trump plans means transfer or evacuation of the Palestinian people, or another Trump statement or another Trump plan was get all of them out immediately by Saturday at noon, which is tomorrow. Those type of plans, they don't really work with the reality. You have to save those people immediately, because if you wait for those plans to kick in, they will not survive this ordeal. So when you ask about the public discourse about, all of those plans that are being floated right now, it's, kind of an illusionary situation. We're not talking about the same. There is the reality, the need to negotiate right now and get the people out immediately. And then if this government wants to resume the war, do it only after you get everybody out. And there is those master plans by Trump, which are, they may be nice to talk about, but they're not connected to the real life of both sides, Gazans and Israeli at the moment. And Trump's big plan with the transfer and the idea that you can move around 1.8 million people, it's basically, we didn't see any country that is willing to go along, and we don't see the people from Gaza are willing to go along with that. So it's kind of a nice to talk about maybe, but it's not realistic. It doesn't have anything to do with reality on the ground. Other than that, we have the ceasefire in Lebanon, which is still holding, and the military pulled out from most of the areas, but they still have to pull out from a certain area, which is very close to Kiryat Shmona and what we call the finger, the northern part, where you have all of the line of the kibbutzim, which are really on the border, Manara and Iftach and so on, and Kfar Giladi and the Metula. So from that area, the IDF did not completely pull out, because some of those Lebanese villages, they really have like a direct 500 meters. 500 meters, it's like, probably like less than half of a mile aimed, like a third of a mile, when you can aim really at people and it's within shooting range. So this area is very, very sensitive, and in that area, it's not done yet. I don't know. Israel is asking for more extension, but it seems like there will be no more extensions on that. There's so many other issues I can go on and talk about, Iran and so on, but I think I'll move it to David from now.
Well, thanks very much for that. Let me remind folks that you can submit questions to the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen. Some of you have already submitted questions, but please feel free to do so. We will have Q&A after David speaks. Our next speaker is David Makowski. David is the Ziegler Distinguished Fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, where he's also director of the Koret Project on Arab-Israel relations. David is a renowned expert on the Middle East. He served as senior advisor to the U.S. Special Envoy for Israeli-Palestinian negotiations, and currently teaches at the Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies. David is a highly respected author and commentator, well known, I'm sure, to most of you. He's contributed extensively to discussions on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, including through his books, his interactive mapping projects, and his frequent media appearances. David's distinguished career also includes award-winning journalism and congressional testimony on U.S. foreign policy in the region. We're delighted and honored to have David with us today. So, David, over to you.
Michael, it's great to be back with DMFI. Thank you for the kind words. It's nice to be on share a Zoom panel with Tal. I would just to pick up a little bit and see it from an American angle here. There's no doubt also what Tal said, the emaciated state of the three hostages that came out, they're being so gaunt, very much shook people in Israel, but also we see it, the president and Trump made a reference over and over about them looking like Holocaust survivors. And it brought into sharp relief this question of, will these people who are in tunnels, will they survive? I had more hope, but, and this, I think, earlier on, there were some people being held in apartments and their state was better, but these seemed to be people coming right out of tunnels almost, and we don't know about the others. So the question is, and I just want to say very quickly for our Zoom viewers, what is difference of phase one, phase two? Because not everyone knows the differences. I would say very much Hamas wanted everything to be phase two. They wanted a stark choice, binary. You get out of Gaza, you get out of Gaza, you get your hostages back. Of course, we're going to want our people who have been convicted for lifetime for terrorism as part of that. The fact that it went back and forth, you can argue it could have been done much sooner, as Gadi Eisenkot and Yoav Gallant have said. But the fact was that phase one was agreed, which was to enable Israel to avert a binary choice. You could get hostages out, 33, of which 25 are alive, and 8 would be dead bodies. You get that out, of course, if they get their quid pro quo on the prisoner releases, which is our bitter pills for Israel, given that Yahya Sinwar himself came out of the Shalit deal, one person, Gilad Shalit, for 1,027. So you don't know who you're releasing. The Shin Bet is supposedly vetting, but still there's no guarantees. Phase one was a way of avoiding that binary choice. You can get the 33, of which 25 are alive, in return for the first 6 weeks of a ceasefire. It's clear that Netanyahu, if he had his druthers, he could do what he would like, he would extend phase one. I do think that he would like to go beyond 42 days. He knows exactly what Tal knows, that the Israeli public is overwhelmingly focused on the hostages. If you look even at Yisrael Hayom polls, they're a right-of-center newspaper, used to be identified very strictly with Netanyahu, but perhaps not anymore. But even, I think, something like 59% of Tzionut Datit, religious Zionist party voters of Smotrich and Ben Gvir, want this thing to continue, even if it means a halt, but to go to phase two. So phase two is, in other words, we're still kind of, I know we would say with all the tumultuousness, it's hard to think we're in the sweet spot of this situation now. I think it gets much harder. This is like going up Mount Everest. It's going to be like a vertical leap in the next few weeks. I think it was clever what Netanyahu was able to navigate around Trump. He never wants to be seen as at odds with Trump, as everyone knows, but he did not pick up the Trump challenge, which is if they all don't get out by this Saturday at noon, the gates of hell would be open. He didn't do that, and I wrote that day that sometimes the news is what doesn't happen, and what didn't happen is he didn't insist on all the hostages. He wants to keep the number the way it is in the deal right now. The Israeli public, I think, would never forgive him if he didn't. He had an opportunity for these 3, and then the next 3, and the next 3. There's like 16 out of 17 more to go, but of that 17, 8 are dead bodies. So there's really 9 to go if you include tomorrow's release of 3. So 6 more after tomorrow. But then the hard part comes, which is, what do you do at the end of phase one? Now, as Tal said correctly, there were supposed to be negotiations already. Netanyahu has basically said that the center of gravity has moved from Doha with the Prime Minister of Qatar to Steve Witkoff at the White House. And I don't know if he made a joke, but on the day 16, he said, I'm starting phase 2, but I'm just starting it with Witkoff. So can he extend phase 1? I have my doubts, because Hamas sees the hostages as their only card to play. And they feel, so long as they have the hostages, that Israel might consider getting out. If they just agree to continuing phase 1, 3 a week for some prisoners, then over time, they have nothing left. So I have my doubts that they will go along with the extension of phase 1. And then we get to the question of, okay, if not, then what? And here I don't know. I'm a bit worried, and I'm even worried about the last tranche of hostages of phase 1, if there's clear that there is no phase 2. Will Hamas say, well, if you're not doing phase two, what's in it for me? So I don't know. We're going to get to a much harder point. It's hard to believe that this is the easy part. The hard part is still ahead. And, a couple of ways to look at it, I would think, is one, Netanyahu really does return to the fighting. Maybe it's not just tactical that he's, saying we're going to deploy all these people on the borders. They're already there, many of them, the reservists. But, he's trying to maybe tell Hamas, you've got a lot to lose if we don't extend phase one. That's one way. Some would say, look, with Netanyahu really is strategic conviction. He's not going to be able to convince people in the south, in the OTEF, in the envelope, to return to Gaza without clearing out more Hamas people. But he's never really answered the argument of Eisenkot and Gallant and these people, which is just get the hostages out now and you could always go back in. When you talk to his people about that, they don't really, they say, well, of course, if, you think it's that easy. I mean, there will be 20 different ways to, to shackle us that we can't go back in. I'm not sure with the U.S. that is so supportive, but Netanyahu, it seems that there's part of it is strategic conviction. Maybe just think there will be a lot of people that want to leave and that he can, through eras crossing, some will get out from Israel as long as they have a ticket elsewhere. I have my doubts that even as individuals, that's the case, but okay. But I think the other way is to be more cynical and say, look, it's about political conviction. It's political calculus, not strategic conviction, because, he needs this government through March 31st, because under Israeli law, if you don't have a budget, the government automatically falls. And he doesn't have a budget for this year. And Smotrich is saying, I'll bring down the government. Ironically, he's also the finance minister who wants to pass a budget. So we'll see. Clearly, then Netanyahu's got a 6-week break for Passover in the Knesset. There's also a big break this summer. Some believe if he can get through, through March, he's basically not going to have elections till 2026, which is the term anyway. So we just don't know. I will say one thing on the Trump factor, because I know that was really the key here for this session. I think what we're learning about Trump is that what many of us have known, that it's often more ploy than plan. If you look at his book, The Art of the Deal, he always says, like, aim high, like start a negotiation from a maximalist position. You could always negotiate downward from a maximalist position, but you can't negotiate downward if you start more minimalistically. And look what happened with Mexico. He said there would be tariffs. And then President Sheinbaum of Mexico said, no, hold off. Don't, I'm going to put some soldiers on the border. We're going to intercept fentanyl. And suddenly, the same day, he said, okay, we'll hold off on the tariffs, at least for a month, and then we'll see. And that kind of, he did the same with King Abdullah of Jordan. He said, I will... conceivable when a reporter said that I could threaten aid. And then the next day with the king sitting there this time, and the king offering to take 2,000 children who are cancer patients. And from what I'm hearing on the Arab side, they wouldn't exactly be in Jordan, but Jordan would be maybe a way station for the Gaza children, cancer patients to go to the Gulf or other European countries and the like. But he got the headline he wanted sitting next to the president, and the president said beautiful gesture was his term. And when asked by a reporter, would he threaten aid, he goes, why would I do such a thing? The same guy who said the day before the opposite. So what I think we're starting to see is what I call the Trump discount factor, that the journalists are going to pick up on more and more to say, okay, he starts that way, but he doesn't end that way. Now, where does he want to go with this? We're not fully sure. I do think, look, League Summit. Sorry if I lost the screen here for a minute. The Arab League Summit next week. I think Sisi of Egypt is delayed his visit, although they claimed it was never formalized anyway that he was invited. But he would like to come to Washington after having an Arab League consensus. My guess is the following, and the danger of Zoom is people record things, and you could be held to it. So I want to be careful the way I phrase it. But Egypt has gained a lot in reconstruction contracts. Other times that there's been Gaza destruction. I don't want to be misinterpreted. I'm not saying that Egypt wants destruction in Gaza. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that they have big companies that do reconstruction. I'm hearing on the Arab side that the Egyptians say, we want to talk to Trump Witkoff as real estate developers to real estate developers. They are willing to, it seems to me, to come back to work into Gaza. They know, they're not stupid. They know that the nature of the ruin is so widespread that you would almost have to do this perhaps in quadrants. There would be displacement within Gaza, not to be misinterpreted, not displacement outside of Gaza, but there would be a section that would be built, and then the population cannot live where there's rubble, where there's ordnance hasn't been cleared. I mean, some of this could explode. So I do wonder if that is what they want to put on the table. I think the Arabs have learned one thing with Trump, not just flatter him, but put something on the table practically. What he doesn't want to hear, this president, is it's all Israel. It's all two states, 67, Jerusalem, the usual Arab mantra. Trump wants to know, what are you going to do? So you might not do it the way I want to do it, which is, Riviera and, and all that. But what are you going to do on the reconstruction issue? Jordan started with the cancer patients. I think it was a small down payment. Egypt, I think, could potentially come in bigger with doing and again, I'm sorry for this with the video here, but I do think that if I had to summarize all this in a bottom line, I would say the following: don't take Trump literally. Someone said, don't take him literally, but take him seriously. Maximalism is the way he plays. It's ploy, often not plan. And the discount factor will become more and more apparent to the journalists. I mean, I think we're already seeing it. I mean, the fact is that Israel's happy to get 3 out on Saturday and not going to war the way Trump, said earlier this week. So that's just the way he negotiates. And, you could say, well, is there any long-term effect of this? I mean, I've been trying to look at Israeli polls and saying, is he mainstreaming? And Tal, I'd be curious what Tal thinks. But I mean, I looked at the polls and I wondered, are the extremists going to get a bump up? Because if the president of the United States says it's okay to displace all these Palestinians, then, Ben Gvir and Smotrich, will sound more reasonable for some. Now, I haven't seen the bump up yet. I think it's too soon to know. But that, frankly, is a bit of my concern, that regardless of the practicality of his ideas, I do wonder if it is going to have an impact in Israel. Of course, each side wants the other side to disappear. The Palestinians will love the Israelis are going to disappear. Many Israelis would like the Palestinians to disappear. But each side knows the other side is not disappearing. So I don't know. I just think these presidential statements might help change the conversation in terms of getting Arabs for the first time to say what they're willing to do, but I wouldn't take them literally the way they're being interpreted in the American media or in Israel either. So anyway, I'll stop here and I look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you. So Tal, let's follow up on the question that David just posed to you. First, how realistic among mainstream analysts in Israel, what is their thought about where the Trump proposal actually lands in terms of anything concrete? And does it have an impact on the internal political dynamics in Israel?
So obviously it was covered here as an out-of-the-box way of thinking of solutions. People said, for so many years, you've been talking about the two-state solution, and here comes someone and throwing something new. It's not the two-state solution. Now, there is an old fantasy here, and I can certainly call it fantasy, which is the Egypt will open the border and let the Gaza people get into Egypt. It's never going to happen. I've been keeping in touch with Egyptian diplomats for so many years. There's only one thing they kept saying since the beginning of the war, and even before the war, they kept saying, you do not let anyone cross the border into Egypt, not even one person, not one. And this was their main concern about the Rafah operation. They were really concerned that the Rafah operation will breach the border and will bring the people from Gaza into Egypt. And this was their only, they never cared, excuse me for saying it, they never cared for the livelihood of the people in Gaza. They never cared for the homelessness or food condition. The only thing they kept talking about is how to preserve the border between Gaza and Egypt in a way that it will not be breached. And I will tell you even further than that. The Egyptian, what they say behind the scene is they see any type of a plan to enter people from Gaza into Egypt. They say it as a declaration of war. It's not just about finishing up Israel's peace accord with Gaza. It's a declaration of war for them. So there are dangers here of losing the biggest big asset of peace accord between Israel and Egypt is really on this is the stakes. I mean, if you keep pushing the Egyptian to do it, we can lose the peace accord. It's devastating. Now, if you want to move it to Jordan, this is a direct threat to the monarchy, having more Palestinians than they already have inside. I mean, it can actually topple the kingdom, the king. It may topple them. And we have this long, very long border with Jordan, which is quiet border. If we are losing that due to this type of process, it's a direct threat to our national security. So pushing those two countries, Egypt and Jordan, to do anything like that is pure craziness. And I'm talking from the viewpoint of the security situation inside Israel. This is just craziness. Now, the plan, if they kept saying, both Trump and Netanyahu, that there are other countries in the mix, and they started to play this funny game here of throwing out names of countries, Somaliland and Puntland, and places in Africa no one ever heard about them before, or Indonesia, or someone said there were other countries thrown in. I mean, really, I don't know. It seems out of context. The prime minister of the name of the country slipped my mind for a minute. Probably David knows. It's a European country. The name of the country slipped my mind, but their prime minister went online and said, it's never going to happen. Nobody talked to me, and I have no intention to participate in anything like that. So, I mean, as I said earlier, it seems like I don't think I think the Israeli people will be joyed to solve the problem like that, but it's unrealistic. And you have to, this is the Middle East. You have to be with your, foot on the ground and look at what's going on here. And it's probably this all scheme seems out of reach.
So, Tal, David's observation that Trump starts here with an intention of ending up somewhere else, what positive could come out of the proposal? Anything?
I'm sorry, what is the question again?
What could come out of the Trump proposal? Since the transfer is not possible, not going to happen, could it do anything to improve the situation?
The only thing that basically can come out of it right now in the close period of time is Trump saving Netanyahu's coalition, because the fact that he just threw in a concept that was on the sidelines of Israel's on Israel's discourse. I mean, as you all know, talking about transfer was, almost outlawed here for so many years. Nobody would dare to even suggest that. And if you did so, it was really people who are not part of the main society. This is not a way to talk about, Palestinians and so on. the fact that and the people that brought this to the table as a political suggestion back in the days, like, Gandhi or other people like 30 or 40 years ago, they were considered lunatics. And the fact that coming from this fringe approach to mainstreaming it and hearing it from the sitting US president, with Israel's prime minister embracing it and clapping for that, and kudos, giving all of the kudos and agreeing to that. The fact that this took place is just goes to show you how the fringe became mainstream, and now they are walking. I mean, like Ben-Gvir type of person, he walks around happily and say, "I told you so. This is my original thought. This is, this was a Kahanism, right? Kind of way of thinking. And now it's mainstreaming." It meant that politically, it gave Netanyahu and his coalition partners, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, kind of the appearance of serious people and mainstream, and now they can go back into government. I mean, Ben-Gvir is out of the government. He can happily go back because my ideas are now the mainstream ideas, and I will be, I'm the centerpiece of Israel society. So, I mean, this is the implication so far. It doesn't. If you're trying to ask me if those groups are now, their mandates in the polling are growing up, no, that's not the case. They still have, both Netanyahu and all of his coalition partners, they have the same problem for more than a year now. The numbers are not good for them. And I know some people think that Netanyahu is picking up and is flourishing. It's not the case. He's not flourishing. In order to, it's not like in the United States when you know the winner. In order to set up a coalition here, you need, to compile number from several parties. And when you look at the total of the coalition numbers, they are around between 45 to 50 at all times, where they need 61. So being on a 50 or 52 is very far from 61. And it doesn't seem like the Israeli public is overwhelmed with joy from whatever Netanyahu brought back home. It doesn't mean to say that he's going to lose the election. I don't want to go there because I don't know. It's, we don't have the election yet. But we don't see any indication that the Israeli public is happy with this prime minister, no matter if he, kills Nasrallah, kills Yahya Sinwar accidentally, bring back hostages. It doesn't matter. The numbers are the same for more than a year now, and they're very, very low numbers for him.
Thank you. David, we have a question from Julie. Both sides are accusing the other of violating the ceasefire terms. Can you give us some light on that?
Well, the Hamas claim is like day 16 of the ceasefire. There were supposed to be talks in Doha. Netanyahu did send delegations, but then didn't give them a mandate to discuss phase 2. Said we'll only discuss technical things about phase 1, although phase 1 is kind of, things are on their own course there, so it's unclear. He said we were just in the listening mode and we didn't really contribute much to the discussion, whatever it is. So they're upset about that. There's an issue of, they're claiming, Israel has pointed out there's more trucks. I think today was the 800, or yesterday 800 trucks or something like that. But Hamas still is hijacking some of those trucks. But they're in some of the caravans, the mobile homes are not getting there, and that is something that Hamas was threatening, although they sorted it out. And look, it's fascinating, Brian. I think the Arab states, I come back to the Arab states because I do think they do want to stay in Trump's good graces. And we don't yet know, though, how decisive of a role they're playing. I mean, it seems that when Yahya Sinwar was alive, he was the sole decider. Now, when his brother is kind of running things, and this guy Izzeddin al-Haddad of Hamas in the northern part of Gaza, it's unclear. It's true the people in Gaza are holding the hostages, so they have kind of a veto that way. But it might also be true that the Arab states are saying, listen, enough with your threats at the beginning of the week. In the end, it all worked out. It looks like, we hope that these 3 are going to be released according to plan. So I don't know. There's going to be brinkmanship on all sides. I'm very hopeful about tomorrow, next Saturday. But I guess when I get to the end of phase one, I get nervous that I'm a little worried that if it's clear that Israel is not doing phase two, that that they that Hamas just pulls the plug, and that gets me nervous. So I'm there's going to be claims, counterclaims, things like that. But I mean, also look, Hamas, they're violating. I mean, this stuff of doing these stage events when they come out, or having the people getting hassled on their way to the Red Cross cars, all these stage productions by asking one of the hostages about their wives when they know that they're, about a wife when they know the wife was killed. I mean, it's a lot of propaganda stuff that upsets Israelis a lot. But at the end, the Israelis want to do what Tal says, which is they want them out. All they want is them that they're safe, they're home, and they're reunited with their loved ones. So there's going to be a lot of charge, countercharge, but I tend to think, fingers crossed that the next, the things will go forward. But I am worried as we get close to phase two about what happens from there.
Thank you. Tal, let's pivot to Lebanon for a
And
second. Oh, go
just
ahead,
wanted to
please.
mention, I just wanted to mention one more thing I forgot to say earlier. Those 3 hostages that came last Saturday, 6 days ago, brought back lots of intelligence in a lot of things that we didn't know. So one thing they brought in intel about 10 people who were held, and no one has seen them since the beginning of the war. Like 10 people that we thought that were alive, and now there is a proof for their that they are alive. This group of young men with those 3 that came out 6 days ago were all held in chains for 16 months. So they were chained in their legs and in their hands for 16 months, plus all of them haven't seen a daylight. So they've been malnutrition, they have barely food, no daylight for 16 months, and chained the entire period of time, and also beaten and held upside down and stuff like that. So there was a lot of intelligence coming out. With the intelligence, as David just mentioned, with the pressure building on, the Israeli society is getting more and more anxious and more, upset on the government if things will fall apart.
Thank you. Let me ask you, Tal, a question from Laura. Has Hezbollah pulled north of the Litani River?
In part of the area, yes. Some of the villages along the border are ruined, villages that Hezbollah used to hold them. But as I said, it's like the western part, if you look at Tzor, Tyre, below the coastline, this area has more. It's not just about the Hezbollah moving out, but also about Lebanese army getting in. So this area is a little bit more organized and in control. Whereas as closer as you get to the Syrian border, to the triangle of Syria, Lebanon, and Israel, this area where lots of the they brought in a lot of the weapons and a lot of the problems took place, that area is still very sensitive, and Hezbollah is maybe not in the villages per se, but they may be wearing just regular outfits, and when you don't know on each and each of them. So this area it's a mixed question. It's a mixed answer.
Thank you. David, you mentioned Sinwar coming out in the Shalit deal. What do we know about the Hamas members and others who are coming out in the current deal? Do any of them outrank Hamas leadership in Gaza? And what does this mean for the West Bank and Gaza Strip, this influx?
It's a great question. I mean, we don't know enough. There's been some reports in Egyptian media, and I asked an Egyptian official yesterday, 2 days ago, about this, that the idea of to take the life prisoners is the lifetime prisoners, who've been convicted for terrorism, for killing Israelis, that Israel's saying they have to be exiled. But the question is, where are they exiled to? Are they exiled to Qatar? Are they exiled to Egypt? It seems that I don't know if the media in Israel is picking up on this, but it seems like a lot are being held in an Egyptian facility, the Lifetime people. Is Egypt going to release them or just, keep them in prison in Egypt? We don't know. But exile to abroad also means Gaza. And the fear is if you let a lot of these killers into Gaza, it could be a shot in the arm and bolster Hamas there. So we don't know fully enough about how many of the exiled are. Right now, it seems most are in Egypt. By the way, Egypt is nervous, and this is the part. I mean, I said this on the BBC, Brian. On TV, I said, look, let's be honest. There's parts that the Arab states are not saying out loud. Yes, it is a taboo for them to, do anything that would be seen as enabling Israel to export the Palestinian issue to their borders. But what they don't say out loud is many of them don't want them themselves because they see them as having radical views. And the Muslim Brotherhood is the sworn enemy of the Sisi regime in Egypt and also is a rival to King Abdullah, even if they are in somehow an element of them are in their parliament, but they're the sworn enemies of these regimes. That's the part the Arab states are not saying on television to their own people. And I say this on the college campuses. I had 190 campuses, and I think I passed 200 now with this past semester. The situation in Gaza is so severe in no small measure because there's a double standard that is not applied to any other conflict, where if it was Raqqa, if it was Mosul in Iraq, if it was in Syria, the first thing you do in a humanitarian crisis is you get the civilians out of harm's way. Here it's the policy not to let them out of Gaza. Now, Israel doesn't take them either, I should say, to the Negev or anything like that. So it's not just the Arabs, of course, but every other conflict, when there's a war, you get the civilians out of the border areas so that they can be safe. And here, Egypt won't let them in. Jordan doesn't let them in. Israel doesn't let them in. And that has enhanced the number of civilian casualties. And that, I feel, is not being made enough in the media discourse about that. Why these casualties are higher. Again, I'm not trying to take Israel's side on all these attacks, but I'm saying that there is a standard being applied to Israel that is not applied to any other country. And, because of that, they don't want these people in these places. Again, I'm not diminishing the taboo that they don't want to be seen as taking, letting Israel export the Palestinian issue. But the part they don't say out loud is what they say to me privately. They go, David, we just don't want these people. Okay? They're radical people. We don't want them. That's the part they don't say on Al Jazeera. They don't say on Al Arabiya. They don't say it on the BBC. And I feel that we need to just have a more balanced perspective about why they're not taking it. I'm not arguing, I don't want to be misinterpreted, that they should take all these people, but I'm just saying that there's rules applied to Israel that are not applied to any other conflict. And so I just think that needs to be said as well.
Thank you. Tal, there's been a lot of talk and rumors and energy in recent years about a broader normalization in the region, particularly involving Saudi Arabia. We have a question from Lisa. What is the impact of the ceasefire deal and in lack of clarity on moving that forward, particularly with Trump's interest in it?
Well, when the Saudis are being asked about it constantly, and they keep saying we are not going to move the needle anywhere unless the Palestinian issue is resolved. And the Palestinian issue is the right of self-determination to a state in the West Bank and maybe in Gaza as well. So they say this is a prerequisite in order to move anything. And I will tell you, the Israeli public is completely nowhere even, slightly able to even consider a Palestinian state at this moment in history. And I presume that maybe in the next, at least, 20 years, I don't see that. Even before the war, there was a huge objection to anything like that. With the war, people who consider themselves center and left completely opposed it. So, I mean, maybe there is like a little, little left in the peace camp that will think about a Palestinian state, but basically, if you go all along, Israel's from right to left, you will not see a support for a Palestinian state. So the big question is, Netanyahu, as the prime minister, was claiming for years that the normalization with Arab countries will proceed without a Palestinian state. That was his premise when he signed the Abraham Accords. And he thought so before the war, and he also thinks so right now, that the statements that are coming from Saudi Arabia right now, well, they're just statements, and when it will come to signing something, it will not be the case demanding a Palestinian state as a prerequisite. I don't know what to tell you. It seems to me that it's kind of problematic for them and for the Palestinians themselves. So I mean, can you have a state without have a state? I mean, I don't know.
Thank you. So David, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna, if I could chime in on this one a little bit. I think, look, when you think of Netanyahu's trip to Washington, there were three big themes that need to be thought about. One is Gaza. He clearly was fearful that Trump would try to impose on him phase two, and he came out, I think, basically with a green light. If he has to go to war, he has that green light. Of course, if it could be avoided, and you can extend phase one, great. So there's the Gaza war issue, and we haven't really talked enough about the day after issue, about what would be there if it isn't the Trump plan, but would there be an interim government and all that stuff. But I think Gaza was one piece. Second piece, Brian, as you suggested from your question, is the Saudi thing. I agree with Tal. I think of the three, the Saudi issue is the kind of the loser issue that has emerged, that that issue is going to be pushed off a bit, because I don't see that going together with a war in Gaza with Israel there. I don't think the Saudis can do it at this time. So if that's the priority, I think Bibi would say, look, Mr. President, we've got 4 years, or I have 2 years till the election. We could deal with this later. So I think that's kind of sometimes the story is what's not said. And I think that was said. Look, when Bibi starts saying that there should be a Palestinian state in Saudi Arabia, he knows he's pushing buttons. And I think that's his way of saying this is not a here and now issue, even if the defense establishment wants this very much, and much of the Israeli public wants it. The final point, and which was alluded to briefly, which I would just like to get in on if I could, is Iran. I do think that for the prime minister, Iran is the urgent thing. I mean, Brian, you know me for decades. Sorry about that. And you know me as a sports fan who, that I think Israel sees Iran as a hockey team without a goalie right now, that their net is wide open, that they don't have air defenses. Yes, Hezbollah still has thousands of rockets. They've not been completely defanged, but in large measure, yes, their leadership has been decapitated. I think to the extent that I'm sure, Netanyahu came saying, Mr. President, that now is the time to finish the job, go after the nuclear sites, 2025, before what's called snapback. That's a UN Security Council resolution that enables the United States as a single superpower to reimpose sanctions. So I think he thinks there's an October deadline. He feels now's the time to hit them. But I do think it's more of a good cop, bad cop, more of an issue of sequencing in a certain way, where Trump said, look, I ran on maximal pressure. I ran on sanctions on Iran. I want to cut a deal. But you saw what he told the New York Post on Sunday. He said, if I don't do it this way, Bibi will strike. Now, whether Israel can strike, does it need the B-2 bomber, a Lend-Lease like the U.S. gave Britain before Pearl Harbor? I don't know. To hit the Four-Dome Mountain, I don't know. But I do think this idea of trying to weave Israel and the U.S. as a good cop, bad cop, where if we get a deal with Iran on, that really sets back their nuclear program, great. If not, there will be a strike by Israel. And Netanyahu did not challenge Trump at the press conference. He said, if you want maximal pressure, his quote was, so be it. Meaning, try this, try plan A. I'm plan B. But having a plan B might give you a better chance of getting plan A. So I think the Iran issue, maybe the media didn't focus on it as much, but I think it was a central theme of the prime minister's visit here. And I would say follow that space. So if I had to rank the issues, I think Gaza is the most urgent because of the hostages, but I think Iran is up there, and I think the Saudi issue is at the back right now. Doesn't mean it won't be revived at a certain point. Trump, I think, would like a Nobel Prize. I think there's a lot of strategic benefit for Israel of getting that normalization, but I don't think all the pieces can be woven in one strategy. You can't fight a war in Gaza and talk about displacing Palestinians and having Saudi normalization on the same day. I think that's going to have to be deferred. And the more urgent issues, Gaza and Iran. That's how I see it.
Thank you. I'm very grateful to both of you. We're going to have to schedule another webinar in Iran, but particularly Tal has food on the stove with 2 soldiers coming home for Shabbat dinner. So we're really grateful for your time and your thoughts. We pray for the safe return of the hostages. We're going to be watching tomorrow along with Israel. And for the last year and a half, we've been working tirelessly to raise the awareness of the brutality that day. We have brought hostage families to Capitol Hill. We're on constant communication with our allies on the Hill, supporting them with briefing materials, messaging points, hosting screenings of Hamas atrocities. We've mobilized supporters to send letters. We aggressively push back on disinformation online. 80% of DMFI endorsed PAC candidates won their general election races. And we're going to keep fighting this fight. So if you're passionate about Israel and you're passionate about maintaining the support for Israel in the Democratic Party and shifting the what's going on in Washington, you cannot make a better investment than Democratic majority for Israel. So thank all of you. Please stay up, sign up to stay in touch with us. On the screen, you should have our social media handles. We're on all the platforms, and definitely make sure you're on our email list. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. If I could throw in a very quick commercial for Tal and myself, also follow Tal on social media and myself, Dave Markowski, but follow us both. And thank you for having us.
Well-earned commercial, and I agree. Thank you.
Thank you. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shalom. Thank you, Tal. Thank you, David. Mark, I really appreciate it.
Thank you.